Marvin Rees, I'm the Mayor of Bristol. I'm not just a politician anyway, right? I'm still a dad, a husband, brother, son, all these things, and I'm still me, still me, I just got myself elected.
Marvin was very quiet and serious and deep thinking, which I can understand because he'd experienced quite a lot of emotional things.
I have memories of feeling vulnerable and a bit exposed. It's probably tied up with my mum being alone as well and her vulnerability.
He was 8 years old when I finally completely broke away from the dad. So he was in and out of our lives. So obviously, as anybody knows, when things aren't going right, it affects the children.
In the absence of our dad, Marvin really took on the role as the sort of father figure.
And I think being the boy, he's like kind of the head of the house in a way, although he was a child. I think he took that responsibility quite seriously.
I think overall as a kid, I wasn't always very happy and I felt quite vulnerable because I think much of my childhood was characterised by being quite poor and an awareness that I was a brown-skinned kid. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I knew it made me different.
He was about 4. He was doing a drawing one day and he thought the brown crayon was black. And I said to him, Marvin, the same way you think that crayon is black, there's people that will regard you as black and will call you black. And they said, no, but they will have other people that will say you're not black, So I felt I was preparing him and then my daughter to be prepared for whatever they would have thrown at them.
It wasn't unusual to be called a nigger by people driving past you in cars as they shout it out or told you to go home. In my school there'd be NF scrawled in, like scarred into the desk. That was National Front. That was the old kind of racist, there ain't no black in Union Jack, send the bastards back type movement that was around in the 70s.
When they was at school, like children would use the term half-caste, which I didn't like, because then they'd say, oh, they're neither one thing or the other. There was another name, mulatta, which isn't flattering either. That's half mule, half donkey, half breed, all these names.
When I was 4 or 5, I think I used to started to want it to be white. So I used to think if I was like the Milky Bar kid, who's this advertising character that used to come on advertising white chocolate, he was a white kid with blonde hair. There was something about white families that I saw on adverts that looked secure. And I wanted that security, so I knew I didn't want to be what I was. I think my mum always wanted to emphasize that I was loved and I was perfect as I was. And that stayed with me. But at the same time, she never pretended racism wasn't real. She was acutely aware of that and tried to equip me with the tools. So this area is St. Agnes. I also used to call it St. Paul's when I was a kid. So this is where we used to hang around a bit. So when my mum had me, or when she was having me, the only place that she could get as a white woman with a brown baby was at St. Paul's. The neighbourhood was, I liked it, but I think it was challenging. When I look back on it, I never felt unsafe. It was my area, but I think from outside, a number of people would have felt coming into St. Paul's would have been dangerous. Outside, St. Paul's had a really tough reputation as a black area as well, so it's associated with black people.
The park opposite, which is different now to what it looked like when we moved here. He spent most of his time over there playing cricket and football with the 2 boys that lived next door to us.
So I've always been interested in politics, but I wouldn't have put it like that when I was younger. I was always interested in fairness and the questions of why some people were so rich while others are so poor. Some of that was because of the world I saw around me, but a lot of it was because that's where I grew up. And I just saw things around me I didn't think were fair.
I was aware that he was very conscious of his surroundings and people's needs, very passionate about injustice.
We have one of the most socially immobile countries in the OECD, in the UK. Your parental background is the single most effective indicator of where you end up in life. So if you're from a poor background, you know, you have to be ferociously smart and find amazing opportunities to exploit, you know, those abilities.
Anyone that meets Marvin knows that he was made for something.
So the point I realised I wanted to be mayor is quite an interesting one. I was at Yale, and David Berg, this professor, said to me, I think you'd be much better more of an executive politician than a legislative politician. I think you'd find it more fulfilling. That was 2010. We didn't have mayors then. So I come back to Bristol, and then government puts out a referendum for cities to go for mayor. And I did start thinking about it a little bit because I had this thing, you know, ringing in my head from David. And then of like 10, 11 cities, Bristol was the only one who voted yes. All the other cities voted not to have a mayoral system. So here we are. I'm in my city that I grew up in, where the guy tells me I should do it. And that was it, I crossed the line. It took one person.
So I hereby declare that Rees Marvin Jonathan is duly elected.
When I went for the election, I remember thinking, this is really challenging. But I did honestly think to myself, but I've been here before. I've been in this kind of situation where I was overwhelmed, I didn't think I was equipped for it, and it was okay. The discomfort is a natural part of that journey. I think my childhood has given me a framework to say to myself that you get tested in a small way, prepares you for the bigger thing that is to come. You can't get the bigger thing without having to overcome the smaller thing because you wouldn't be equipped. First African heritage mayor in Europe is an amazing thing. Certainly for black people and Asian people in the city, this has been quite special. And I was elected the same day that Sadiq Khan was, you know, the first elected Muslim mayor. So both of us getting elected on the day was something quite special for British politics. I want to be a good mayor. I mean, there's an overarching goal, right, which is about making sure this is a city of hope. And that sounds very abstract, but you know, that's made up of decent work, being able to get a home, every child getting off to the best possible start in life, good mental health and well-being. I think the challenge is that the leadership, across the UK actually, the leadership is not reflective of the diversity of the population. Right. So my being elected is different because obviously I'm a mixed-race kid from a poor house in this city. And I shouldn't be a politician in that sense. I shouldn't be a political leader by the data. There's some very, very practical, physical things that we want to deliver, but always minded to say, how do we make sure that what's happening for the population is good? So for example, when we build those big infrastructure projects, we want to make sure local labour is lined up to get the contracts and the jobs so that we benefit our local economy and tackle up our issues with poverty and inequality in the city, which are pretty stark.
Always puts other people before himself, you know, whether that be family, friends, or even the wider community now in his current role.
Stop, you're falling!
Taking on a role in sort of any kind of government or local authority position, you're trying to satisfy, you know, masses of people. You're never going to do that. You know, one size definitely doesn't fit all. So there's always going to be somebody who is going to try and, you know, sort of attack. And that's what we've seen over the last, you know, sort of year of his tenure.
My Lord Mayor, supplementary to the second question, and I remain here totally baffled as to why, when you're not being criticised and not under attack on this matter, you are not prepared to give any clear and transparent answers. And my Lord Mayor, I think members should be aware that I requested a meeting with the Mayor to discuss these issues in private, and the Mayor refused to see me.
You seem to be trying to pin on me a responsibility for decisions that were made under your watch and throwing all this stuff in the air. And as I said before,
Many times he comes home frustrated. A lot of the time it's around the criticism that he gets and on social media, people that want to have a dig. But I think as time has gone on, his skin's gotten thicker And he knows who he is, and he doesn't let them knock him down. He also has incredible people around him to support him and tell him, you know, who he is, and, you know, correct him if he's in the wrong place.
Becoming a candidate and becoming a mayor, I said it feels like putting a suit jacket on that's too big for you. And over time you grow into it. But what makes you grow into it is overcoming the challenges and facing opposition and so forth. Every time you face a bit of opposition, you get bigger until one day you realise the suit fits you and you're fine with it. I said to someone today, and they were saying, oh, you're having a tough time in politics. I said, I had a tougher time as a teenager. Ain't no challenge that comes at me today politically that compares to what I've managed to overcome. So the mere fact to have some hope in my life is a victory for me. So, you know, while the challenges come and you feel, you know, they come in their way and you prefer things to be easier, at the same time, you've got to put it in context, right? There's worse things in the world.